Spoiler warning for Borderlands 3, basic game design concepts, and Mario. And Deltarune, I guess. 2D platformers were some of the most popular titles of the early gaming era. One of the reasons was that they were just so simple to pick up and play at a glance. The ultimate goal is moving your little guy to the right until you make it to the end. They give you the buttons to move in any other two-dimensional direction, but you always know where to go and you can always see everything around you. If I sat my mom down in front of Super Mario World and handed her a controller, she would instinctively know to go right after spending a minute or two figuring out what the buttons do. Everyone was happy jumping over barrels, legally distinct animals, or dudes throwing tools, but John video game got bored and decided we had to shift the perspective. Enter the third dimension. It enabled games to have so many more features and ways to visualize your surroundings. The player gets all these new things to look at, but it also gives them the option to look anywhere else. And that means the players of your 3D game will inevitably be stupid enough to not see whatever it is you want them to pay attention to. How do you solve a problem like that? I'm sure the player is going to look around eventually, so you want your desired objects or places to stand out. How do you make things stand out? By creating contrast. You make an important area light up a little more, have your desired object be distinct from its surroundings, or use a bright and eye-catching color to direct your player's gaze. Over time, games got more modern and players relied more on UI elements like quest markers and compasses to navigate any given level. That doesn't mean the visual markers went away though. They rather got pushed into the background but still remain in a level designer's toolbox. As it is very bright and eye-catching, yellow paint remains one of those tools that has gotten a lot more use in recent years. Mainly to show players ledges or ladders that they have to climb. Presumably because a lot of game testers ended up missing them. It looked kinda ugly and unnatural though, because just splashing yellow paint at a cliff face ends up being pretty immersion breaking. So a lot of hardcore gamers made a big deal about it and the whole yellow paint thing ended up falling out of favor. So why am I talking about a failed game design concept in a Deltarune video? Well, Toby Fox looked at the yellow paint trend and said, actually my game has like a million things to explore and I need a way to communicate to my players how to progress. So he went over to Randy Pitchford's shed, stole some of his paint buckets and very deliberately painted it over a bunch of words to help you, the player, out in navigating Deltarune. Great video everyone, let's go hit the showers, great performance out there, we solved another mystery, let's go. What? It's way more complicated than that? Okay, rebuild the showers and get back in here, because we got a lot of text boxes to look at, to figure out what the yellow text actually means. Toby Fox has this knack for writing mechanics in this game that are at first completely innocuous, then become impossibly cryptic, and after unraveling everything in painstaking detail slowly start to make sense. Deltarune's yellow text is no different from that, so that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. My obsession with yellow text started out probably over a year ago when I was bored and looking for a reason to replay Deltarune for the 4th or 5th time. You know, normal stuff. I remember seeing all these differently colored words and not entirely knowing what they were about. Even searching it up didn't get any satisfying answers, so I thought, why don't I try to find an answer and write them all down in the process? It wasn't something that was properly documented anywhere else. Yes, the dialog dump shows yellow text and I did use it to make sure I didn't miss anything, but you can't search yellow text specifically in it. So there I went making a big ass list, hoping to maybe glean some fun implications from it, and boy was it interesting. But before I get to that, we should maybe take a look at yellow text in Undertale first. It does kind of use the yellow paint mechanic I just described, but only in very few places. Like in this scene when you don't hit Monster Kid right away after slipping, or when Papyrus is trying to help you solve a puzzle. Undertale also just uses it for yellow things like Flowey, and in a more abstract way matters between Mettaton and the soul. Yellow text does also show up more connected to Undertale's core narrative, like when it's referencing Asgore, or being closely connected to determination, connecting it to the yellow safe spots. The game directly spells it out at one point. But Sans also uses yellow text when referring to your special reload powers caused by determination. There's also, please don't make me seriously consider this abomination. All in all, Undertale yellow text gives significance to a few core narrative mechanics and lets the player make some connections between them. There's too few instances for it to really amount to anything other than some supportive pieces for the story though. But there are 2 more yellow happenings that actually matter a lot more to this video. The 2 instances of Deltarune foreshadowing that Undertale has. One of them literally just being the word Deltarune, the other one being the patched-in introduction to Susie, very clearly setting up yellow text as having more significance in Deltarune. So what exactly is up with Deltarune's yellow text? Yes, it is supposed to guide the player, but there are so many outliers and sometimes nonsensical inclusions that I don't believe it is just yellow paint coded text. Like, why does Lancer keep calling us clowns in yellow text? Why is he doing it in 3 different variations? That's not helping me progress the game whatsoever. Nor is having a butler cafe. And then there's Starwalker. This fucking guy is literally a walking joke about yellow text. It feels like Toby started getting in his head about the whole thing and needed to let off steam by writing about piss in bright yellow text. All that to say, back then I had all of these yellow words rotting away in a text document on my desktop and not much of an idea what to do with it. And then chapters 3 and 4 released. In terms of yellow text, there actually weren't too many grand reveals in comparison to the last 2 chapters, except for one particular scene. This conversation between Susie and Noelle has unhinged amounts of yellow text, and I highly doubt it's just because Toby got bored writing the dialogue and turned on the AI TikTok captioning instead. Not to mention Chris straight up reacting to only text boxes with the funny color in them. This alone established yellow text as something that Toby is using very consciously and kinda reactivated me to see what exactly we can find out about it at this point in time. So now that I'm 100% sure the yellow text is actually meaningful, I can lay out all of the relevant pieces of dialogue and see if there's some rules or patterns to figure out about them. And for that we need to look at a text box. No, not that one. The text box diagram. This is close to every instance of yellow text in the game, only excluding what are pretty much duplicates due to repeated text with the same implication. On the horizontal axis they are ordered from how yellow paint coded they are to, well, this is pretty much what we're trying to figure out in the video. On the vertical axis we get the narrative importance of the character whom the text box belongs to. This doesn't directly translate to how important the text box itself is though. Boxes on the bottom end of the chart can still have big implications for the meaning of yellow text. It's just about the character who set them. Except for Starwalker. I swear to god, if Starwalker actually ends up having narrative importance, I'm going to freak out. So before we go over the diagram, let's put down some observational ground rules. Statements about yellow text that are 100% true right now, and will likely get shadowed by Toby when the next chapter comes out. Yellow text does not appear in save point descriptions, disconnecting Deltarune's save points even further from Undertale's. Yellow text will never appear after a choicer, meaning you can't lock yourself out of yellow text. That doesn't mean you can't miss it though. While the majority of yellow text comes from dialogue that is pretty central to the narrative, there's a bunch that requires you to talk to optional NPCs or interact with objects that can be out of the way. Yellow text doesn't appear in battle-specific speech bubbles. You know, the ones that appear right before enemies do their attack. There is an exception, however. Spamton exclaims himself to be a big shot in red text during our first encounter with him for some reason. Finally, doing the weird road unlocks no new yellow dialogue. All of the text that gets changed as a result of it stays plain. Do these matter for interpreting yellow text itself? On their own, not really, but it gives some context on how yellow text gets used, so it might help once it gets a little more complicated. Actually, moving on to the diagram, we can see a lot of the yellow paint coded hints on the left side. They are essentially diegetic directions or hints from the in-game characters. The yellow text sets it apart to the player, sort of saying this is where you go to progress. I don't think yellow text directly translates to a different speech pattern or sound that everybody notices, but Chris definitely knows when a word is highlighted in yellow, making it another diegetic mechanic in Deltarune to some degree. We'll get to that in more detail later. And yes, there are plenty of directions that are given without using yellow text. It is a little inconsistent, but as far as I can tell, yellow text usually appears when there's other places to explore, ironically turning it into more of a don't go there yet sign for all the lore goblins trying to get their grubby hands on every possible dialogue in the game. I'm also counting other color types of text as yellow text here. They are usually recolored for flavor. Gerson's book and the donation waterfall are pretty straightforward examples for that. Except for red text, it does seem to behave distinctly different from yellow text, but we'll get to that later. Tanner's super fancy text is entirely excluded here. I think this one's purely for emphasis and pizzazz, or some other cheeky references. Mainly because we do have one instance of him using yellow text independently of it. The further we get to the right of the diagram, the harder it gets to justify yellow text being a guide to the player. But to find out what it is instead, I made these text box sub-boxes to categorize and group up yellow text with similar intent or context. Going through all of them should give us a better idea of what yellow text wants to communicate when it isn't vigorously backseating us. Starting off with the item narration box, this one's real simple. Menu interactions usually get highlighted in yellow text. Both the item that you get and where it goes in your inventory are yellowified. Fun fact, Toby only coined the term money hole in chapter 2, before that the game would just refuse to tell you where the money went. Sometimes items don't get highlighted like the Saber 10 and I have absolutely no idea why. Maybe someone else can spin up a theory for that. Battle narration is also straightforward, it usually just tells you the quirk of a given fight. Spamton wants to make a deal, don't give him your money. Loosening the crown progresses the fight. Susie learned the S action. Use Unleash to annihilate the incomprehensible monster born from the depths of darkness. So far we haven't seen it go beyond tooltip level, but I would not be surprised if that changed in the future. Over here we got what I lovingly call hometown metagaming. It's straight up the narrator telling you if you missed something worth experiencing, or preventing you from skipping a large chunk of the game, like letting Chris sleep through the intro sections of each chapter, or Clam Guy telling you how to get the Onion San questline started. My favorite example of it though is Toby practically begging you through the screen to not toss away your entire inventory. He still lets you do it, of course. Can't recommend. You obviously keep your key items, but everything else is gone. A little further down is Ralsei's tutorial. It seems to set up a lot of ground rules for colored text. Yellow is for sparing, blue is for pacifying tired enemies, and interestingly Ralsei connects the color red to Chris's soul. He does specifically say your soul when addressing them. It's questionable if that is because he's trying to hide the soul's true nature, or if he just means the soul belonging to Chris. Either way, this kinda sets up red text as something connected to Chris and the soul. The rest of this is just Ralsei explaining game mechanics and referring to the battle UI, although it is noteworthy that he harps on the word fighting quite a bit. You would expect Shaum to be filled with cryptic yellow text because of this whole situation where he knows that you know that he knows that this is all a fucked up game, but he just keeps quiet about it. Instead he only wants you to fight Jevil, giving a bunch of hints on how to find the key pieces and then combine them. However, Shaum does provide us with the first mention of the Knight, who only gets red text this one time. I think it's just to set the Knight up as a dangerous enemy, so you pay more attention to anything related in the future. The church is more hometown metagaming. You're pretty much being directed towards Noelle and Alphys through the yellow text. This might be the most yellow ladder type shit in the game as of now, and I don't think that 25% red text counts as actual red text. Just some fun flavoring. Next up is Tanner's TV time. Most of the yellow text here has to do with inventory related interactions. Picking anything up and transporting it into your sidebar marks that item as yellow text, which is par for the course at this point. It gets a little more complicated though, as we're playing a game within an imaginary world of the game that we are playing. Then again, who knows if that matters to the whole yellow text question. The sword rod also has a bunch of yellow text, notably colored differently. Keep that in mind for later. One final text box that I excluded from this section is all the way over here, because I have no goddamn idea what it means. Seriously, I have found nothing substantial relating to the Tropic of Love. Is it just kind of a pride thing? Why are the letters yellow then? Does this no copyright song have anything to do with it? Because that's the only thing I can find when googling it. I bet it's pretty cool, Tanner, but why the hell is the text yellow? You can make stupid jokes, Toby, but the second you're spilling lemonade over the words, I will analyze them. Things are starting to heat up a bit with Ralsei's prophecy. He recounts it with so many yellow words sprinkled in that I can't in good conscience call them player guidance anymore. There's a few pieces that essentially tell you to go east so you can seal the fountain, but words like Delta Warriors or Prophecy don't mean much at the moment. This section is probably one that has tripped me up the most so far, especially because it's right at the start of the game. I think the idea here is to get the player familiarized with some of the grander concepts in Deltarune, and also do a bunch of foreshadowing. To some events in Chapter 4 for example, and likely more endgame happenings. Bringing us right to the stool form dialogue? Yeah, this one's puzzling, but I think it's supposed to be some short-term foreshadowing. Lancer showing off his special form in Chapter 1, Susie and Ralsei then learning their own forms for all three to combine into a greater sum of their parts. That leads to them learning how to use Axe on their own against Sweet Captain Cakes, and finally the great payoff in the Mecha Queen fight. So based on these two boxes we can make an assumption that yellow text likes foreshadowing things or setting up events in the future. In a way, this is still Toby trying to drill important plot details into our subconscious without us really noticing. Moving on to Gerson, who keeps things really simple with his little book puzzle and a bunch of directions within the Dark World. At this point you might have noticed that the secret bosses haven't been very involved in the whole yellow text business. Jevil is completely blank, Spamton only has battle narration, the Knight doesn't seem to be a fan of text boxes at all, and Gerson only has yellow text because he's doubling as your main guide NPC through Chapter 4. Even other characters connected to the freedom theme like Ramp don't do yellow text. Okay, let's get this guy over with. Starwalker has to be the stupidest bit a game developer has ever committed to. I fully expect him to appear in every chapter at this point, but there is no way he has any relevance to Deltarune's story. The fact that you have to unlock him in the first place by backtracking in a specific room in Chapter 1 is crazy enough. I know we're also brain-rotted that this doesn't seem like a big deal, but having a character that obscure actually do anything significant would be extremely unhinged. Next. The egg rooms. Even though only one of the 4 egg rooms has yellow text, it's still noteworthy to compare them. Now the yellow text could be here because we're operating within the TV time text box logic, but there isn't an intermediate inventory for the egg to go in this time. I don't want to pull the Toby makes no mistakes card here, but this yellow text still feels very deliberate. is the first time an egg room isn't just one empty tree. This one in particular has a lot of Chris lore to it, and the Eggman spiel gets a lot more elaborate. It's almost like yellow text is very connected to Chris. Let's mark off some extra text boxes floating around real quick. A lot of them are directions or little hints from NPCs like the Rudin, essentially giving us the solution for the Clover fight. Lancer calling us clowns repeatedly is a little weird. As the chapter goes on, the word kinda transitions out of being yellow text, maybe indicating a change in the emotion that the word is charged with. The Bad Inspector text box is also noteworthy because other instances of getting a title aren't highlighted in yellow, but there is a world where that could be a mistake. Okay, I've stalled you out long enough, let's get to this monstrous scene and figure out why the hell Toby was playing piss paintball all over it. First of all, the red text. Again, connected to the soul because they're in this room by chasing the soul in the first place. Easy, no for the yellow text. I'm sure you're asking whether I can arrange all of the yellow words into a code that translates into a cipher, which we then run through a base 64 decoder, giving us a link to a hidden website, of which you have to find the 2015 internet archived version, that then gives you a contrast value to apply to the original website, revealing a quarter of a hidden Gaster code, and if you speak that Gaster code into Mike the microphone, you unlock the Schminkus ending where the knight kinda just becomes a chill dude and everyone moves on living their happy life forever and ever. No, I don't think there's any of that. I tried to arrange the words a bit, but I found no sensible patterns or connections between them. But that doesn't mean we can't gather anything from the words. Rather, let's look at the context of each text box. First of all, Chris specifically reacts to the text boxes with yellow in them. I'm sure a lot of you noticed that already. But topically, all of the text boxes are also connected to Chris in some way. Sometimes indirectly, but every time Susie or Noel talk about Chris doing something, there is guaranteed yellow text somewhere in the text box. There is a section in the conversation where Susie talks about the made-up Rossi boy from another school and how she wants to include him, which is the one time no yellow text shows up for a while, somewhat confirming that entire idea. Das's room is also the only time Chris hears yellow text while having full agency over their body. They can definitely tell when it is spoken and visibly react to it. While they are possessed by the soul, we don't get to see these reactions, most likely because we are the ones in control. So from all that we can conclude our final rule for yellow text. Chris is involved, in some way. Even in the hint type yellow text pieces, Chris is the one being addressed, sometimes directly, sometimes through them towards the player, giving us just enough information to draw a somewhat solid conclusion. Before I properly define what the yellow text means, let's go back to the red one. It is definitely related to the soul, that's a no-brainer, but Chris is connected to it just as much. Ralsei sets it up as Chris's soul in the tutorial. Chris specifically was the one who slashed the tires. Meanwhile, Noel's red text refers exclusively to the soul. Even Spamton's mentions are kinda vague, and it's questionable how much he exactly knows about the soul. So when Carol hits us with the big red U, it's not 100% clear that she's talking right through Chris. And it does kinda change how much she knows. Is she only aware that Chris has a thing in them that has very unique powers, or does she straight up know that she's in a video game and is intentionally talking to the player? Also, did Carol use the red text on purpose, or is that Toby just enhancing it for us to make it stand out like he presumably has so far? I don't think we can answer right now how Gaster-pilled Carol or the Knight are, especially not based on these 6 text boxes. Anyways, this video is about yellow text, not red text. As always, trying to figure out Tricky Tony's complicated riddles just ends up leaving us with more questions. Let's recap what we know about yellow text. It is related to Chris, and it has been used to foreshadow events. Okay, it's not much, but it's enough to work with for me. Next, let's look at what major storylines Deltarune has going on right now. We have the Chris vs. Soul freedom narrative, the Dark World Light World Roaring Knight plotline, and finally the hometown family death disappearance mystery. So far these narratives have all been pretty segmented in how they're built up and foreshadowed, as we've only just hit the halfway point of the game, which means we should be able to assign yellow text to at least one of these topics. So yellow text doesn't really appear in dialogue relating to Chris's qualms about possession. Secret bosses like Spamton or Javel don't really touch it, nor do other side characters connected to the freedom topic like Ram or Sean. But it does show up in another context that I haven't discussed at all yet. Every time we make a choice on something Chris does, or rather should be doing, it is highlighted in yellow before we confirm it. So when you select a choicer, you end up directly exerting control over Chris. It's really hard for us to tell because of the nature of the game, but some unknown entity taking over your body can feel good. I'd imagine these choices are more enhanced versions of us taking over and forcing specific actions. So when Susie and Noel recall that kind of feeling through the yellow words in Des's room, however they're doing that, it's kind of understandable that Chris gets started. That being said, I don't believe it explains everything on the diagram. Let's see if we can find connections to yellow text in other plotlines. In terms of Dark World main story elements, we've got Ralsei's prophecy, which admittedly still trips me up a bit. Beyond that, the main bosses that have talked about the night leading up to the grand reveal were lacking any tinted ladders. Queen has 0 yellow text boxes, King only has an unused one that presumably happens if you finish chapter 1 violently, and Tenna has 1 text box that is intriguing but very unlikely to connect to the night. If anything, the prophecy seems to tie into a different subplot that centers around defying fate and breaking the prophecy, a narrative that chapter 4 recently pushed into the foreground. I would say the anti-fate stuff is more tied to Susie's character progression though, so based on that, the lack of supporting text boxes for the Dark World plot makes me want to phase this one out too. Which leaves us with Chris's mysterious past connected to the entire hometown death incident. And wouldn't you know it, this one actually makes a lot of sense. Susie and Noelle talking about the past connected to Chris, yellow text giving us segmented characterization of them, and the chapter 3 egg room being very Chris focused. Not to mention the shelter key. So here's the big moment. What exactly does it mean? The yellow text can exert control over Chris. Similar to how Toby is using it in the game to make you, the player, pay attention to certain things and complete specific objectives, us using yellow text through the choices makes Chris complete certain actions in a less subtle manner. And I know what you're thinking. We control the soul controls Chris, choices are confirmed by selecting them as the soul, of course it's about control. But I'm also saying the non-choicer yellow text very much plays into that whole dynamic, and can foreshadow a hint at Chris-related events in the future. That being said, it's impossible to know how yellow text actually looks and sounds within the game, especially when spoken by characters that aren't intending to control Chris. I'd imagine it's only something that affects them, and because we are experiencing the world through the yellow little gremlin, this part comes through in the form of yellow text. The descriptions of a speakerphone kind of voice throughout the Weird Road are probably the closest we'll get to that. Over the last 2 chapters we've seen Chris already try to break free from our control here and there, but it seems like the yellow text as a tool a la Would You Kindly from Bioshock is far from its full potential at this point. If anything, the Weird Road showed how much further it can go. Now the problem is that it's so hard to determine what kind of yellow text conveys what kind of information. There's a very obvious distinction between Toby desperately begging you not to toss away all of your items, and Susie recounting Chris's flirting skills. But there's so much in between those extremes that it gets hard to figure out what yellow text fulfills what kind of purpose. Like, is a little house cleaning foreshadowing something? Or is it just meant to guide you up to the little house so that you don't miss the fake out battle gag with the swatchling? Is Susie talking about the cool axe just meant to get you on the path towards the secret boss? Or are axes in general more significant later on? Even Bertley's Lucky lines could just mean that Toby is preparing you for being alone with Ralsei for a while. I hope you understand at this point why I've been haunted by yellow words for the last 2 years of my life. It's also multifaceted, and it feels like we're still missing some very crucial information to completely understand Deltarune's textual gold nuggets. All that aside, after about 20 minutes of very condensed literary analysis, we now have a solid interpretation of yellow text, and no matter how confident I am in it, I might as well use it to make some assumptions about Deltarune's narrative. That's the fun part after all. Let's do a blitz round figuring out all these little one-off text boxes, starting with Lance's clown comments, which may be connected to Chris being a prankster. It's something that keeps coming up in different conversations, and based on what we know now, might be Chris's catch-all excuse for the not-so-great things they do while we are controlling them. Tenna only has this one instance of yellow text very early in chapter 3 in response to Susie, but I don't think he was addressing Susie anymore, rather asking Chris what they're doing. Specifically, watching them create a dark fountain right in front of the TV must have been a little mind-boggling. Not to mention it's one of the few things that Chris did outside of our control. This Trashy, whose name is Blue. We've only seen this blue tint connected to tired enemies so far. I guess that means everyone's tired of Trashy. Good one, Toby. The Butler Cafe. This seemed like one of the most nonsensical yellow text at first, but in the context of control, it becomes part of a few references to subservience that keep coming up a few times in yellow dialogue. Lackeys, house cleaning, or a butler. Moss being highlighted in green. Chris just likes eating weird stuff. Honestly, you didn't need to watch this video to figure out that the moss eating is characterization for Chris. While we're on that, only chapter 2 and 3's moss are highlighted in green. I don't know why, and at this point I don't even know where to start with that, so we'll just move on. The stool form dialogue also seems very out of place here, but it ends up paying off into Susie and Ralsei learning their own acts, giving them more autonomy and distancing Chris from their role as a leader of the group, something that Ralsei is worried about as Chris already doesn't have much control over their life. The yellow text in Tenna's game also brings up Chris's memories playing video games with their brother. Tenna makes a few mentions of that throughout the entire chapter. Since Chris is the one who made the fountain this time, it's no surprise that the main content of this dark world is so closely tied to one of their favorite activities, the Bed Inspector line. This is actually one of the stronger connections to Deltarune's plot altogether. Chris obviously sleeps a lot. We don't really know whether it's just them staying up at night or some insomnia stuff. Or maybe they stay up at night because of the insomnia. Either way, there's a lot of sleeping to the point where it's a diegetic mechanic to skip longer hometown sections. Then we have the whole Dark World dream thing, Noel and Birdley thinking they are dreaming, the musical dudes in the Chapter 4 Dark Worlds asking whose dream this is, mentions of hopes and dreams both in Undertale and Deltarune. Suffice to say, sleeping and dreaming are one of the core concepts in Deltarune, and Chris is right in the middle of it, making sure everyone's beds are in tip-top shape. There's one more piece of red text about the locked cat flap in front of the Kattenheimer home, which is very obviously a joke about the shelter code. The text box afterwards even calls it useless information, so I'm just gonna be so bold and dismiss it. Don't fuck me on this one, Toby. Right next to it is the Tropic of Love. Does it actually mean anything? Okay, so I had a whole section here about Chris's emotions being projected onto the Dark World, and while that might still be true, I don't think it lines up with the yellow text very much. It's rather about the player going out of their way to find the Tropic in the first place. Ralsei referencing the machine we built in Chapter 1 kinda ties into the same point, as it is something we do rather than giving Chris a command and it happening off screen. Before moving on from Tanner's game for good, I do want to mention the irony of Chris controlling a version of themselves while we're controlling them. At the end of the Sword Route, they even lose the little control that they think they have to us before the small Chris just walks off. Okay, you get the idea, but we've made it all the way to the top right corner and there's still this big empty space over here. It's almost like I forgot something. The goddamn Throne of the Gods. This unsuspecting little side room in Queen's Mansion is what started my 1 year long meltdown over fucking colored video game letters, and snowballed into this entire video. It is the only thing to interact with in this room, and while there are other rooms that just exist for one joke, none of them have yellow text in them. So what the hell is up with this text box? Let me give you the full picture. The Throne of the Gods is a joke referring to a massive stack of chairs that fits the equally massive stack of tables. It's a childhood thing, I'm sure most of you know what it means. So where do we find a lot of chairs to stack up? A school, maybe? Let's take a look at Hometown School. There's only 3 rooms and we've been in 2 of them plenty of times, so what if we check out room number 3? And there it is. 6 chairs stacked on top of each other in Toriel's classroom. The literal Throne of the Gods in the flesh, or plastic rather. We don't even have to make an assumption here, the narrator just says it. It almost feels like this little extra room in Queen's Mansion was just made to reference this exact stack of chairs, and connect Queen and King with each other through the royal water bottle behind the tables. But wait, there's more. One last yellow text box that I've conveniently hidden away until now. When you go to the convenience store in Chapter 2, Sans tells you to put stuff in a basket if you want to buy something, leading you to an impossibly high stack of baskets that the narrator calls the Throne of Evils, pretty much connecting them to the rest of the Throne fuckfest and finally completing our diagram with the addition of the Thronespiracy. Also, what's with the apostrophes here? I don't think that's right. Anyways, it's not like Sans and Toriel have much to do with each other in Deltarune, right? Right? Let's go back to Toriel's classroom, because it actually changes quite a bit throughout the 3 instances that you can visit in Chapter 1, 2, and 4. Something that doesn't change and hasn't changed in a long time is Toriel's name written on the dry erase board. Notably, Toriel used the Mrs. title here, which is neutral in terms of determining marriage status. So this doesn't help us at all timeline-wise. I guess if you wanted to gamble on it, it'd be more likely to be after the divorce, but that doesn't get us anywhere. As for the things that did change, we can start with the desktop wallpapers on Toriel's computer. The first one is Chris and their brother dressed up for Halloween 8 years ago. Chapter 2's wallpaper is Chris and Azriel playing video games together, notably with Azriel as the older sibling using the knockoff controller. The final wallpaper in Chapter 4 is the 2 siblings pictured with a snowman that they built. It has 2 branches coming out of the head resembling the ones of a deer. Based on the How to Draw Dragons book being lended out around 7 years ago, and it having been used in Des's room, we can conclude that these pictures have been taken before her mysterious accident. In a similar manner, the deer snowman also means that the 2 families were much closer at the time. So the wallpapers seem to be Toriel not wanting to let go of the memories of both the Dreamers and holidays being close. It is her workplace after all, you'd presume she spends the majority of her time at least close to that computer. The food on Toriel's table seems to degrade in quality over time, at least according to the narrator. I think the students usually put fruit on their teacher's table. This is a trope that I'm not American enough to fully grasp, but it could indicate her stressing out or getting distracted over Chris being gone a lot, and acting weirder than they normally do, meaning her teaching job is suffering in quality from it. Finally, the Throne of the Gods itself. It starts out at 6 chairs in Chapter 1, then going up to 9 in Chapter 2 and 10 in Chapter 4. The table stack in Queen's Mansion also has 10 tables, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is where it stops growing. But why and how are the chairs increasing? The initial 6 chairs make a lot of sense. There are 6 tables in the room and they're probably in use when Toriel is teaching. But where are the new chairs coming from and who is putting them there? I've checked all of Hometown in all of the timelines and there are no plastic chairs of the same kind anywhere else. You know what room should have chairs of any kind? Alphys's classroom. Come on, I know this is probably America and you guys don't let your grocery store cashiers sit down, but there's no way these kids can concentrate and learn while standing for 6 to 8 hours. So why are there no chairs? Is it because making pixel art of characters sitting down from behind is complicated and a lot of work? Yeah, probably, but I'm not letting Toby off the hook over that. There's this backhanded focus on chairs that I can't quite let go. So here's my final theory about all the chair stuff. Chris had some kind of incident or even accident relating to stacking up chairs too high. I'd even go as far to say that it could have been part of the moment that led to Des's disappearance. Toriel then removed chairs from Chris's classroom in an overreaction to that incident. And where are the chairs going? Well, there's a fourth room in the school that has been locked up for the entirety of our stay in Deltarune so far. It's seemingly unused, so I wouldn't be surprised if plenty of chairs are currently stored in that room among other things. That's also how the new chairs are getting to Toriel's classroom. Chris and Susie aren't exactly in school as much as they're supposed to be, so it's easy to miss chairs being moved around. It sounds a little strange speaking that out loud, but honestly a classroom without chairs is strange as fuck on its own. But I can't understand if that sounds too far-fetched. At the very least, I think some kind of chair stack called the Throne of the Gods is going to come back in a Dark World. Maybe to overcome an obstacle in some way. That seems to be what the original yellow text box was implying. Oh right, this video is about yellow text. You know what also has ties to the color yellow and chairs? Image Friend. Not to mention the two colors relating to the shelter key in the Sword Road, recalling the same pink-yellow color scheme, which also gets carried by the secret bosses. Yeah, once we've made it to a scene as pivotal to Deltarune as the Des incident, all of our plotlines that are kind of doing their own thing right now are going to intertwine. If you dig deep enough, you can already kind of connect a few places where they intersect, like here, but it's very far from anything substantial, so I'm gonna stop pulling shit out of my ass right now. Maybe there's enough to make a part 2 out of this once another chapter is out. I left a lot of things open in this video that could eventually be answered, and according to Gerson, we'll learn more about pink and golden stuff in chapter 5. If you want to know more about Chris beyond the yellow text connections, you should check out these two videos by Nighthawk and Korantu. The latter one in particular had me kind of rewrite the second half of the video to shift the focus on Chris being controlled. It used to be a lot more about Chris's past and how they're being characterized by the yellow text. I still think that has a small part in how yellow text is presented, but the control aspect is definitely taking up a much larger part of it. Yellow text still seems to be a rather unexplored part of Deltarune, so I'd love to hear any other interpretations you guys have, or maybe some related nuggets of text that I've missed. I tried to find stuff to correlate to my maddening ramblings, but there were like 2 Reddit threads and some dude talking about Deltarune Yellow, which made me want to make this video even more. What I'm trying to say is, oh my god, please somebody talk about the fucking yellow text. I can't take it anymore. I'm 100% sure that it means a whole lot. Even if my interpretation turns out wrong, it'll pay off to something, and those chairs will come back. That's the 2 things I'm sure about. I guess this is where I plug some shit. There's a Patreon where I post videos early and some bonus stuff. You can subscribe too, that'd be cool. Videos will be more frequent than they have been so far, although I'm not gonna promise exclusively Deltarune stuff. The next video won't be, but it will be about a game that I think Deltarune Andes will enjoy. Yeah, that's it, bye.